Ma'am, are you all right?
No.
Who's buried here?
According to my family, I am.
Once in a while.
Sarah Williams had been declared dead by everyone who mattered, except she was still very much alive. Every Sunday morning, she came to the cemetery carrying fresh white lilies and sat beside the grave that bore her own name. To everyone who passed by, she looked like a grieving widow. But she wasn't mourning the dead. She was mourning the life that had been stolen from her, and the truth hidden beneath that polished headstone would expose a betrayal that no one saw coming. Daniel Brooks couldn't stop staring at the polished granite headstone. His eyes moved from the engraved name to the elderly woman standing quietly beside it, then back again, as though repeating the motion might somehow make the impossible disappear. The name carved into the stone was unmistakable: Sarah Elizabeth Williams. The woman holding the bouquet of white lilies looked down at the grave with the kind of sorrow that could only come from years of silent suffering. There was no confusion in her eyes, no sign that she had lost touch with reality. Instead, she looked like someone carrying a truth too painful for anyone else to believe. During nearly 30 years caring for Rosewood Memorial Cemetery, Daniel had met grieving husbands who refused to leave their wives' graves, parents who visited children every birthday, and veterans who saluted fallen friends long after everyone else had forgotten them. But never, not once, had he met a woman mourning beside a grave that carried her own name. Before the story takes another turn, tell us the city you're watching from in the comments. We always enjoy seeing where everyone is watching from. And if you love emotional stories filled with mystery, family, and unforgettable endings, make sure you subscribe because you won't want to miss the next one. Now, let's find out who made the world believe Sarah Williams was dead. As Sarah gently placed the flowers against the polished stone and brushed away a few fallen leaves with trembling hands, Daniel finally found the courage to speak. "Did your family put this here?" Sarah nodded without lifting her eyes. 5 years ago, Daniel frowned in confusion. "But you're standing right here." Sarah slowly closed her eyes before answering in a voice barely above a whisper. "Not to them." The words lingered between them. Daniel wanted to ask another question, but instinct told him to wait. Some wounds weren't opened by questions. They were opened by patience. For several moments, silence settled over the cemetery. Birds sang somewhere beyond the old oak trees while a gentle breeze drifted through the rows of headstones. Then Sarah quietly looked across the hillside and whispered, "People think cemeteries are only for the dead, but sometimes they become prisons for the living too." Daniel felt a chill despite the warmth of the morning sun. He had expected grief, but he hadn't expected words that carried so much hidden pain. Before he could respond, Sarah slowly turned and walked toward the cemetery gate. Daniel watched until she disappeared beyond the stone entrance, yet something deep inside him refused to let the moment go. Every instinct told him there was a story buried beneath that headstone, and it had nothing to do with the woman whose name was engraved on it. The following Sunday, Sarah returned exactly as before. She arrived at the same time, carrying another bouquet of fresh white lilies, and quietly stood before the grave with tears in her eyes. Daniel pretended to trim the hedges nearby, hoping she might speak again. This visit lasted longer than the first. Sarah gently traced her fingertips across the engraved letters before whispering, "I kept my promise. I came back." As she prepared to leave, Daniel finally asked the question that had been on his mind all week. "Does anyone ever come here with you?" Sarah smiled sadly. "They think there's no one left to visit." Daniel hesitated before asking one final question. "Do you have children?" Her face softened immediately. "One son." "Does he know you're here?" For the first time, tears rolled freely down her cheeks. "If my son knew where I was, he would already be here." Daniel stood frozen. That single sentence answered one mystery while creating an even bigger one. If her son loved her enough to come immediately, why hadn't he found her in 5 years? Had they become strangers? Had life simply pulled them apart? Or had someone made certain they would never see each other again? That afternoon, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Sarah's words. During his lunch break, he walked into the small cemetery office, where decades of burial records were stored inside dusty filing cabinets. He wasn't trying to invade anyone's privacy. He simply needed to understand how a living woman had ended up with a headstone bearing her own name. After several minutes of searching, he found the file labeled Sarah Elizabeth Williams. His hands slowed as he opened it. Inside were a death certificate, burial permit, obituary, and funeral program dated 5 years earlier. Everything appeared completely legitimate. According to the official records, Sarah Williams had died peacefully after complications from advanced dementia, and her funeral had been attended by family, close friends, and members of the local community. Daniel stared at the photograph attached to the obituary. It was the very same woman he had spoken to only hours earlier. His heart began to pound. Either the records were part of an impossible mistake, or someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to convince the world that Sarah Williams no longer existed. Then another detail caught his attention. Listed beneath the obituary was the name of the person who had arranged the funeral, Victoria Langston. Relationship, stepdaughter. Daniel quietly closed the file and looked back through the office window toward the distant headstone beneath the old maple tree. He had finally answered the first mystery. Sarah hadn't imagined the grave. Someone had legally buried her identity 5 years ago, but one question now refused to leave his mind. If Sarah Williams had never died, whose funeral had everyone attended? Daniel Brooks barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sarah Williams standing beside the grave that carried her own name. By sunrise, he had convinced himself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Perhaps the cemetery records contained an error. Perhaps another woman simply shared the same name. But deep down, he already knew neither explanation made sense. The photograph attached to the obituary was Sarah, the woman he had spoken to only hours earlier. More importantly, the pain in her eyes wasn't something anyone could pretend. It came from years of being forgotten while still alive. The following morning, Daniel returned to the cemetery office and carefully reopened Sarah's file. This time, he wasn't interested in the death certificate or the burial records. He was searching for the one person Sarah had spoken about with complete certainty, her son. Buried beneath several legal documents was an emergency contact form completed almost 10 years earlier. One name immediately stood out: Marcus Williams. Relationship, son. Beneath it was a Seattle phone number. Daniel stared at it for several moments. Calling a complete stranger with a story this unbelievable felt irresponsible, but remaining silent felt even worse. Nearly 3,000 miles away, Marcus Williams stood inside a high-rise construction site overlooking downtown Seattle. At 44, he had earned a reputation as one of the city's most respected structural engineers. His days revolved around blueprints, inspections, deadlines, and meetings that often stretched late into the evening. Yet despite the demands of his career, one habit had never changed. Every Sunday evening, he called his mother. Over time, those conversations became shorter. Sometimes Sarah sounded tired. Sometimes she spoke only a few sentences before saying she needed to rest. Then, almost 5 years earlier, the calls stopped altogether. Marcus could still remember the phone call that changed his life forever. Victoria Langston's voice had trembled as she said, "Marcus, I'm so sorry." Before she continued, he already felt something was terribly wrong. She explained that Sarah's dementia had progressed much faster than anyone expected. Then came the words that shattered him. "She passed away this morning." Marcus collapsed into the chair beside his office window, struggling to process what he had just heard. Victoria told him a small private service had already been arranged because doctors advised against delaying the funeral. Marcus immediately booked the first flight home, determined to be there. But before his plane even left Seattle, Victoria called again. This time her words cut even deeper. "Marcus, the funeral is over." He remembered the disbelief in his own voice as he asked how that could be possible. Victoria calmly replied that they knew he wouldn't arrive in time and had scattered flowers at the grave on his behalf. That night, Marcus cried harder than he ever had before. Every year afterward, Victoria mailed him photographs of fresh white lilies placed beside Sarah's headstone. Every Mother's Day she sent another picture. Every Christmas she assured him she had visited the cemetery. Marcus never questioned any of it. Why would he? The grave was real. The obituary was real. The photographs were real. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same heartbreaking conclusion. His mother was gone. Back in Rosewood, Daniel finally found the courage to make the call. The phone rang 3 times before a calm voice answered. Marcus Williams speaking. Daniel suddenly realized he had no idea how to begin a conversation like this. "Mr. Williams, my name is Daniel Brooks. I work at Rosewood Memorial Cemetery." Marcus assumed it was a routine matter and politely asked if everything was all right. Daniel hesitated before replying, "I'm calling because I think I've met your mother." Silence immediately filled the line. Marcus's expression changed. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I think you've got the wrong family." Daniel looked through the office window toward the old maple tree where Sarah had stood the previous morning. "No, sir," he answered calmly. "I don't think I do," Marcus replied without hesitation. "My mother passed away 5 years ago." Daniel took a slow breath before asking one question that changed everything. "Then could you explain why she's standing beside her own grave every Sunday morning?" Marcus stopped breathing. The rolled construction plans slipped from his hands and scattered across the office floor. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Finally, Marcus whispered, "What did you say?" Daniel looked once more toward the cemetery before quietly replying, "I believe your mother is alive." In that single sentence, Marcus's entire world came crashing down. For 5 years, he had mourned a woman who had never stopped waiting for him. But if Sarah Williams was still alive, then one impossible question remained. Whose funeral had he spent 5 years grieving, and who had gone to such extraordinary lengths to convince him his own mother was dead? Marcus Williams didn't remember leaving his office. The next thing he knew, he was sitting alone inside his truck, staring at his phone as Daniel Brooks's words echoed over and over in his mind. "I believe your mother is alive." Those 5 words shattered everything he thought he knew. For 5 years he had mourned his mother's death. 5 birthdays had passed. 5 Christmas mornings had come and gone. 5 Mother's Days had ended with flowers placed beside a grave he believed belonged to the woman who had raised him. Yet if Daniel was telling the truth, every tear, every prayer, and every goodbye had been offered to an empty lie. His hands trembled as he searched through the photographs Victoria Langston had mailed him over the years. Every picture showed the same polished headstone, the same bouquet of fresh white lilies, and the same carefully arranged flowers. He had never questioned them because they looked genuine. But now, seeing them with fresh eyes, something felt wrong. Every photograph had been taken from almost exactly the same angle. The flowers changed, but the background never did. It was as though someone had carefully hidden everything beyond the grave itself. Marcus wasted no more time. Within hours, he had booked the first available flight to Rosewood. The following afternoon, Daniel was waiting outside Rosewood Memorial Cemetery when a black SUV slowly pulled into the parking lot. Marcus stepped out looking exhausted, still wearing the same navy jacket he had left Seattle in. Neither man said a word. Daniel simply nodded toward the old maple tree standing in the distance. "She comes every Sunday." Marcus slowly walked through the rows of polished headstones until he stopped in front of the grave he had visited only through photographs for the last 5 years. His legs almost gave way beneath him. There it was, his mother's name engraved in cold granite, the same headstone he had cried beside, the same grave he believed held the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. He reached out and rested his trembling hand against the polished stone. "I talked to you here," he whispered quietly. "I told you how much I missed you. I thought you could hear me." Daniel stood a respectful distance behind him before quietly saying, "I didn't know whether to call you." Marcus slowly nodded. "You did the right thing." At that moment, Daniel looked toward the cemetery entrance. "She's here." Marcus turned instinctively. An elderly woman carrying a bouquet of fresh white lilies walked slowly through the iron gates. She hadn't seen him yet. He recognized her immediately, not because of the photographs, but because nothing about her had changed. The gentle way she walked, the way she adjusted the scarf around her shoulders, and the quiet smile she gave whenever she heard birds singing nearby, were all exactly as he remembered. Time seemed to stop. "Mom!" Sarah Williams froze where she stood. The flowers slipped from her hands and scattered across the pathway. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. It was as though 5 stolen years had simply disappeared. Then Marcus ran toward her and wrapped his arms tightly around his mother. Sarah held him with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. "I knew you never stopped loving me." Marcus couldn't answer. Every apology he had prepared during the flight vanished the moment he held her again. Instead, he simply cried. For the first time in 5 years, mother and son stood together once more. After the emotion settled, Marcus gently looked into Sarah's eyes and asked the question that had been burning inside him since Daniel's phone call. "Mom, what happened?" Sarah took a slow breath before quietly beginning her story. Everything changed after Marcus's stepfather passed away. Victoria had offered to help with the estate, promising to handle the insurance, the bank accounts, the taxes, and all the legal paperwork. Sarah trusted her completely. One day, Victoria placed several documents in front of her and explained they were routine estate papers that simply needed signatures. Believing there was nothing unusual about them, Sarah signed every page. Weeks later, Victoria returned with 2 doctors Marcus had never seen before. They asked Sarah a series of simple questions about the date, the president, and her birthday. Sarah answered every question correctly. The doctors smiled politely before leaving without explanation. A month later, everything changed. Sarah's driver's license disappeared. Her passport vanished. Her bank cards were gone. Even the keys to her own house no longer worked. When she asked Victoria what was happening, Victoria calmly smiled and explained that the doctors believed Sarah was becoming confused. Sarah looked down at her hands as she recalled the memory. "I wasn't confused," she said quietly. "I was frightened." Within only a few weeks, Sarah's entire life slowly disappeared around her. Neighbors stopped visiting. Friends stopped calling. Members of her church were told she needed complete rest because her dementia was rapidly progressing. Anyone who asked questions received the same explanation until eventually everyone believed it. Marcus listened in stunned silence before asking the question he couldn't understand. "But why didn't you call me?" Tears immediately filled Sarah's eyes. She explained that she had tried. She wrote letters. She called every phone number she could remember. She begged for help. But every letter disappeared before it could be mailed. Every telephone was taken away, and every attempt to reach her son ended the same way. Then she revealed the lie that hurt Marcus more than anything else. "They told me you knew," she whispered. "They said, you didn't want to see me anymore." Marcus lowered his head, unable to hide his pain. "No, Mom," he replied. "I searched for you every day. I thought I buried you." Sarah gently reached across the bench and held his hand. "I know," she said softly. "I never blamed you." After allowing them a moment together, Daniel quietly asked the question that no one had been able to answer. "If they declared you dead, who identified the body?" Sarah slowly shook her head. She didn't know. But before Marcus could speak again, she reached into her handbag and carefully removed a small brass key wrapped inside an old handkerchief. Marcus looked at it with confusion. Sarah explained that before his father died, he secretly gave her the key and told her that if anyone ever tried to erase her or steal everything they had built, she should open the red storage box hidden in the attic. Marcus stared silently at the small brass key resting in his mother's hand. For the first time since learning the truth, they possessed something Victoria didn't know existed. But across town, inside the old Williams family home, Victoria Langston was already searching through the attic with a flashlight. Someone had told her Marcus had returned to Rosewood, and she was desperately looking for something before he could find it first. Marcus Williams and Daniel Brooks left the cemetery without wasting another minute. The old brass key rested tightly in Marcus's hand as they drove toward the Williams family home. Every traffic light seemed to last forever. If Victoria Langston was searching the attic, it could only mean one thing. She knew something valuable was hidden there, and whatever it was had the power to destroy the carefully constructed lie she had spent 5 years protecting. When they finally arrived, the old house looked almost exactly as Marcus remembered from childhood. The white porch swing his father had built still hung beside the front door, and the maple tree Sarah had planted the year Marcus was born now stretched high enough to shade the entire front yard. Everything looked familiar, yet nothing felt the same. The house no longer welcomed him. It felt like a place waiting for the truth to finally return. The front door was unlocked. Marcus stepped inside and immediately heard footsteps above him. Without saying a word, he and Daniel hurried upstairs. The attic door stood open. Boxes had been pulled from the shelves and scattered across the floor. Old family photographs lay among broken picture frames, dusty furniture, and forgotten Christmas decorations. Standing in the middle of the chaos was Victoria. For just a moment, the confidence she had worn for years disappeared from her face. Then she forced a nervous smile. "Marcus, I wasn't expecting you." Marcus didn't answer. His attention was fixed on a deep red metal storage chest resting beneath the attic window, exactly where Sarah had said it would be. Victoria quickly stepped in front of it. "You don't need to open that." Marcus calmly walked toward her. "I think I do." She folded her arms and tried to regain control. "Everything your mother owned has already been settled." Marcus looked directly into her eyes before quietly replying, "My mother is alive." The color immediately drained from Victoria's face. She struggled to recover. "I don't know who filled your head with these stories." Marcus reached into his pocket, opened his phone, and showed her the photograph Daniel had taken only hours earlier. It showed Sarah standing beside the grave engraved with her own name. Victoria stared silently at the screen. For the first time in 5 years, she had no explanation, no excuse, and no lie prepared. Marcus gently moved her aside and inserted the brass key into the lock. It turned effortlessly. As the lid slowly opened, decades of carefully protected secrets came into view. Inside were neatly organized folders, sealed envelopes, a handwritten journal wrapped in blue cloth, and resting on top of everything was a letter written in his father's familiar handwriting. Across the front it read, "To my wife Sarah, and to my son Marcus." Marcus unfolded the letter with trembling hands and began reading aloud. "If you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. I have watched greed change people I once trusted. I pray I am mistaken, but if anyone ever tries to take away this family's home, your identity or your dignity, everything you need to protect yourselves is inside this box." As Marcus continued reading, it became painfully clear that his father had anticipated a legal battle long before his death. Hidden beneath the letter were certified property records proving the home belonged solely to Sarah, notarized copies of his will, original medical evaluations confirming Sarah had never suffered from dementia, and a USB flash drive labeled simply, "If the truth is ever questioned." Daniel immediately connected the drive to an old laptop sitting nearby. The first recording appeared on the screen. Victoria stood inside the family living room arguing with Sarah. "You'll sign these papers whether you like it or not," she demanded. Sarah remained calm as she answered, "I'm not giving away the house." Victoria smiled before replying, "You won't have much choice." The next recording was even more disturbing. A private care consultant handed Victoria a folder and quietly assured her, "The guardianship paperwork is ready. No one will question it." Marcus felt his heart sink. Then Daniel opened another envelope. Inside were every birthday card, every Christmas letter, every family photograph Marcus had mailed to his mother during the past 5 years. None had ever been opened. They had all been hidden inside the attic. Beside them sat another bundle of letters written by Sarah herself. Hundreds of carefully folded pages addressed to Marcus. None had ever been mailed. 5 years of love had been locked away inside a box while a mother believed her son had abandoned her, and a son believed his mother had died. Daniel slowly turned toward Victoria. 5 years, he said quietly. You let a mother believe her own son stopped loving her. Victoria lowered her eyes. I never planned for it to go this far. Marcus finally broke the silence. No, he replied. You planned every step. At that very moment, Marcus's phone rang. Detective Laura Bennett was calling. Unknown to Victoria, Daniel had contacted the authorities while Marcus searched the attic. Less than 30 minutes later, detectives filled the house. Every document was photographed, every recording was copied, every forged signature was examined. By the end of the day, investigators had uncovered the entire scheme. Victoria had used falsified medical reports to obtain temporary guardianship over Sarah, transferred valuable assets into shell companies controlled by trusted associates, convinced neighbors, church members, and longtime friends that Sarah's dementia had rapidly worsened, and quietly arranged a memorial service using an empty casket after claiming Sarah had requested a private cremation. The body everyone believed had been buried had never existed. The grave itself had been created for one purpose alone, to convince the world that Sarah Williams no longer existed. As police officers escorted Victoria toward a waiting patrol car, she turned one final time and looked at Marcus. I was trying to protect what my father built, Marcus answered without raising his voice. My mother helped him build it. You weren't protecting his legacy. You were stealing hers. Victoria lowered her head. For the first time, there was nothing left to say. Several months later, justice had done more than punish the guilty. It had restored what had been stolen. Sarah's legal identity was officially reinstated. Her driver's license was reissued. Her bank accounts were reopened. Her home was returned to her name. Neighbors who had believed she was gone stood in tears as they watched her walk through the front gate for the first time in 5 years. The garden she had once loved had become overgrown, but Marcus smiled as he handed her a pair of gardening gloves. I thought we could start here. Sarah looked around the yard and laughed softly. It'll take weeks. Marcus picked up a shovel and smiled. I've got time. Together they spent the afternoon pulling weeds, planting flowers, and bringing the garden back to life, one flower bed at a time. A few days later, Daniel stopped by carrying another bouquet of fresh white lilies. Looking around the restored garden, he smiled and asked, No cemetery this Sunday? Sarah looked at Marcus before answering with a peaceful smile. No, I finally have somewhere better to be. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the old maple tree, Marcus stood beside his mother in the garden they had rebuilt together. For 5 years, someone had tried to erase her name, her family, and her very existence. But the truth had accomplished what no lie ever could. It brought a mother home, reunited a family that never stopped loving one another, and proved that even the deepest deception cannot stay hidden forever. Sometimes the greatest betrayals are not born from hatred. They begin with greed, fear, and the belief that no one will ever uncover the truth. But no matter how carefully a lie is buried, the truth always finds its way back into the light. Before we end today's story, tell us in the comments, what part of Sarah's journey touched your heart the most? We always enjoy hearing your thoughts and seeing where you're watching from around the world. And if you love emotional stories filled with mystery, family, and unforgettable endings, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.